So I am going to speak in English, and hopefully if you can't catch it now, you can catch it. Maybe they'll have subtitles afterwards. Well, first of all, it's hard to believe that it's been 30 years since we made this game. I want to thank you for inviting me here. Marco, thank you very much for inviting me, and Daniela, thank you for making the film, because without that, I wouldn't have been invited. And this is our first time here in Italy, so it's a huge honor. So I will start. And where did it start? So I grew up in the 1950s, 1960s. That was my childhood. I grew up devouring science fiction. I loved it from as soon as I could read or watch science fiction on television or old movies. Some of my favorite authors were Robert Heinlein, Isaac Asimov, Ray Bradbury, H.G. Wells. I had books. My mom said, go out and play. I said, I want to read these books. So I would stay home and, not always, I'd go out too, but this is where my heart was, I believe. Also loved TV shows. Star Trek, Twilight Zone, Outer Limits. I assume at least some of these made it over here. Star Trek probably more than most, just because of the space travel part really caught me. So after high school, I started as an engineering student at UCLA, at University of California in Los Angeles. Took classes like calculus, physics, chemistry, programming in Fortran, and I hated it. I thought I was going to be an engineer. I thought that doing programming would be a lot of fun, and it was just awful. And around that time, I started learning about humanistic psychology. This is what happened after, I think, 1 year at this new school that had opened up recently in Sonoma, California State University at Sonoma. There I got to take classes like the psychology of dreaming, parapsychology, hypnosis, Improv 101, where you're actually improvising acting, and mime. And I liked that. That was a lot more fun than the other ones. But this was also where my heart was. It was much closer to the science fiction and the far out stuff that I was interested in. During the time I was at Sonoma, we got to take a field trip to the Stanford Research Institute, or SRI. And I saw my first computer game, which was called Space Wars, on a CRT run by some big mini computers in a back room. And there's something about that just connected. And it was a wow experience. It's like, this is it. This is what I have to do. But they really weren't for the public yet. This is, you still had to be an engineering major, so I kind of put that aside. But then in 1977, a few years later, by then I met my wife, Annie, and we opened up this nonprofit educational computer center in Marin County. And it's called the Marin Computer Center. And you can see there we are. On the far left is me and Annie next to me. We had kids coming in from all over Marin County, all over the Bay Area for field trips, for classes, for birthday parties. We would put a computer on that large projection TV, and that was one of the most popular parts. We had just seen Star Wars, and during the time I was there, I actually programmed, I guess you can call it programmed, my first Star Wars game. And it was called Star Wars Hodge. And we basically just took words from the Star Wars universe and put them into a puzzle where you had to find them. That was about the level of game programming at the time. But you can see that the same year that we opened the computer center was the year that Star Wars came out. So I was very much enamored with it. See the processor technology saw 20 computers we had. There's Annie showing someone how to play chess on the computer. There I am looking over in the upper right corner. Sometime around the same, same time, elsewhere in Marin County, same county that we were in, there is this company called Lucasfilm. And it was a small privately owned company just north of San Francisco where Marin County is. And as I mentioned, Star Wars had just come out. Hugely successful film. I believe we saw it on like one of the first days it opened and went back a few times to see it over and over again. A few years later, the second film in the trilogy, first trilogy came out, Empire Strikes Back. Around that time, George Lucas realized that it was very expensive and time-consuming to make all these plastic models or models and then destroy them and have to do stop-motion animation where you're moving them through a room. And he thought that, this new thing called computer animation might be something that you could use to advance the art. So this is an example of an image that was done by Information International Incorporated to show what could be done as a computer graphic of an X-Wing. But I think it took weeks to render just one frame, and they still didn't get all the the dirt and the aging and things that George wanted in his chips. So he realized that really wasn't quite time yet. Computers and storage were just too slow and too expensive, but they were clearly getting faster and cheaper. So even though you couldn't do it now with computers, you could do it eventually. So let's find the best computer graphics wizards and start a new division so we'll be ready when the time has come, when the technology catches up to our vision. So the new Lucasfilm Computer Division was born. This is actually a picture of the back of one of my jackets that had Computer Division on it. Elsewhere in Silicon Valley, down south from Lucasfilm and from Marin, there is this other company called Atari. And Atari was, around the same time, 1977, created the Atari 2600 VCS, which stood for the Video Computing System, computer system. It was the most popular game system at the time, and it sold around 40 million units during its lifetime, with about maybe 900 different game titles. So this was spring of 1982, Return of the Jedi. The next film was about a year away. George decided to form a group to do high-tech entertainment and something outside of films. And Atari approached Lucas and said, why don't you do games? And we'll give you $1 million to help fund the start of this new organization. They decided the new group would be part of the Lucasfilm Computer Division, and a new organization, or partnership, I should say, was created, Atari Lucasfilm. I ended up being one of the first people hired for this new group, and here's an article from a magazine called Atari Connection. The people on the team at that point were Charlie Kellner, who was an Apple employee number 7 and a huge programming whiz, especially with the 6502 processor, which is what the Atari 800 used. Dave Levine, another game guy. Peter Langston was our general manager, or I guess the head of the group. There's me. Lauren Carpenter was known for figuring out a way to do fractal landscapes. And he was on loan to us for my first game, actually, Restaurant Fractalus. And Gary Winnick was an artist who had worked at Atari, and he came on board also. So what happened to the Lucasfilm Computer Division? I think that was given away in Mateo's film, but does anyone know what happened to the Lucasfilm Computer Division? Just yell it out if you know. Pixar, yes. George sold it to Steve Jobs in 1986 for $10 million, and Pixar was born. So most of the people left. We stayed behind, and after doing several different games, we decided, Ron Gilbert created a new engine. He had been playing a bunch of games from, I guess we consider them to be our competitor, Sierra Online. And after playing a bunch of their games, he kind of came up with a list of things that we shouldn't do. One was don't kill the player. Well, he didn't mean you should never kill the player. He meant don't arbitrarily kill the player. In other words, if you walk into a wall and hit your head, you shouldn't die. Or if you pick up a piece of broken glass and maybe cut yourself, that shouldn't cause you to bleed to death and die. If you walk off a cliff, then yes, you could die. Or if you jump out of an airplane without a parachute, as you could do in Zak, then it'd be an appropriate thing to happen because you're kind of telegraphing this is something that's dangerous. Don't do no arbitrary puzzles. If you have a puzzle in a game that you get stuck on, and you finally hear the solution, and you think, there's no way I would ever have thought of that solution, then that's probably an arbitrary puzzle. It doesn't make any sense. Call it moon logic. It's logic which just doesn't exist in the real world. On the other hand, if you finally hear the solution, you kind of blame yourself because it was so obvious in retrospect, then it's really on you for not having figured it out. And you won't feel so bad for not having got it yourself. No busy work. In other words, you shouldn't have to clean up the bathroom and wash the floors and do all this stuff. If you don't enjoy doing it in real life, you probably wouldn't enjoy doing it in a computer game. And reward intent. So like if you know the player wants to go across the room, don't create barriers. Let them just click and have them go there. And one of the last things was don't guess the parser. Well, most of the adventure games up until this point, you use a parser, which means you type in text. The text has to be parsed out or figured out or broken down by the computer and figure out what you want and then do the action. And unfortunately, there are so many words that could mean the same thing that often the programmer hadn't thought of the word that you're trying to use to do what you really want to do. So if it was, look at the bush, and the programmer might come back and say, there is no bush here, I don't see a bush. Or I don't know what you mean. And the programmer had thought it was a shrub or something, so something similar. So you turned all this into an article in 1989. This is after you've actually done a few games. It's online if you want to look at it at grumpygamer.com, Why Adventure Games Suck, with underlines. So Ron decided to do a new game using all these ideas. And the game was called Maniac Mansion. It turned out to be the first title that we self-published at Lucasfilm Games. And it used SCUMM, which stands for Script Creation Utility for Maniac Mansion, which is a language and a system to make it easier to create adventure games. And some of the features for SCUMM are the ability to build sentences by pointing on a verb. In the first iterations, they were actual words on the screen, and an object on the screen to say, like, pick up rock, for example. And you click on the word pick up, and you click on the word rock, and the character would walk to the rock and pick it up. So you don't have to type anything in, no parser. Click where you want the character to go, and the walk there. So instead of having cursor keys and having the character go like this, and then turn this way, have them go like this, and like this way, if you just want them to go across the room, you click where you want them to go, they'll walk around any obstacles and automatically go to where you want them to go. So it just makes it a lot easier. We had cutscenes, which were non-interactive movies that advance the plot. So it kind of shows you something that's happening elsewhere in the universe of the game. So you realize it's moving the story forward even if you weren't in that room, in that location. And then a couple things for programmers to make it easier for us to actually implement the games. One is called multitasking. It just means you have multiple things, multiple scripts or commands or lists of commands that could be running concurrently. You don't have to wait for one to finish for the other to start. They're all kind of running at the same time. And also an easy to understand scripting language, one that you could actually read and kind of get an idea of what's supposed to be happening. So here's an example that I actually made up, but it could have been from a game. So for example, let's say in Zak McKracken, if you open the refrigerator and then you have Zak try to leave the room, leave his house, there's a script that starts which has Zak go back to the refrigerator and close it and then leave. So for example, you might say the command would be walk actor Zak to object refrigerator. He'll walk there. And you have a command that says wait for actor, so you're waiting for the actor to actually get there. Then once he reaches there, it says actor Zak do animation reach, so he'll hold out his arm, wait a second or a frame, then change the state of the refrigerator, so change it from open to closed, and have Zak say a line, I forgot to close the fridge. And that's pretty close to what we did in the game. Here's the cat clock again, we just saw in that video. Here's a sample of how that script might go, where you have a loop, kind of keeps on going over and over and over again. And all it's doing is changing the state between two states, the tail this way and the tail that way, waiting, making a sound, waiting 60 jiffies, which is a second, and then changing state again, and just doing that as a loop. And do we have sound coming into the computer? There should be a low sound effect happening. No sound? There we go. Yay. So to make this happen, all you have to do at the every time you enter the room is have a little command that says start script clock tick. And when you leave the room, it automatically gets killed and stops. So I had just finished working on Maniac Mansion. I was the SCUMM programmer, when doing most of the scripting for the game. And I wanted to use SCUMM on my own game. Maniac Mansion was Ron Gilbert and Gary Winnick's game, and I felt like, okay, I'd learned this new skill, how to use the language. I knew I wanted to do something new age. That's the stuff I was just really interested in. There was kind of spirituality, psychic, kind of like far out stuff. I talked to our general manager, Steve Arnold, and he said that he knew just the guy, so he put me in touch with a friend of his named David Spangler, who was a spiritual teacher, author, and written a bunch of books on spirituality, and flew me up to meet with David. This is what he looks like now. And we spent about 2 days at his house up in Tacoma, Washington, which was right near Mount Rainier. And we decided to put everything New Age and spiritual into the game, including any crazy stuff we could find. The farther out the theories, the more fun it would be. It didn't care whether it was true. The whole idea was going to be, kind of irreverent and tongue-in-cheek. So I was a little worried at first that he was going to be upset if I tried to make fun of any of this, but he just got right into the play aspect, and he was great to work with. So we had a bunch of different locations. Some of you saw in the video. Stonehenge, Seattle's Mount Rainier, which is where the first UFO sighting was in 1947. Pyramids and Sphinx in Egypt. Mayan ruins. Ancient alien statues. That's where the bird flew in. The ruins of Atlantis, which I'm sure we've all visited at some time or another. The Bermuda Triangle, you just have to take the airplane there and then jump out of the airplane to get to it, which we saw in the movie. And then the face of Mars, which was a huge thing around the time I did the game. This is how it looked in the game. For those who don't know, there were images taken by a NASA satellite or spaceship that went by Mars that really looked like a face. In later missions, They decided that it was just a weirdness of the shadows at the time it went over, and it no longer looked like it. My theory is that they quickly realized they were being photographed, and they went over and covered it up with something else to make it look totally different. We had characters that were unusual. There was the golf-playing witch doctor in Zaire, which is now the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and the floating guru in Kathmandu, Nepal, and then several alien races. So rather than list everything, I want to read this actual letter we got from a fan soon after the game came out. Dear Sir, I am returning this game, Zak McKracken, because I find it quite unsuitable. The excellent game, playability, and graphics further compounds the real problem. The game is saturated with New Age, Satanism, teachings, and concepts. The following are a few that I and others have come across. Eastern religions, meditation, African witchcraft and magic, a medium, a spiritual guru, a religious devotee, a person converts to an Eastern religion, a superior guardian race of ancient ones, one religion over all of time and all the world, communication by aliens through dreams, out-of-body experiences, mind linking with animals, changing of consciousness, mind over matter and teleportation, mental telepathy, mind controlled by aliens. I not only find these false teachings objectionable, but consider the immersing of them in humor and presenting them as a game very dangerous. Not any of this was mentioned in the advertisements for the game. I implore you to at least make it clear to unaware buyers that this is a New Age game that deals with religion. As a computer consultant and part-time youth pastor, I have an obligation to others in this regard. I will await your response before deciding how to further fulfill my responsibilities to warn others. Reverend Merwin Updike, Altoona, Pennsylvania. So, well, we actually loved the letter because he got it, other than the intent, he got everything exactly right. I mean, it was clear that he had played the entire game from start to finish and got it all. So we took the letter and published it in our fan magazine and made sure that he reached the world with his news. So the original name for the game, I think, was something like Jason, the news guy. It wasn't Zak McKracken. I finished the game doc, and Jason was a reporter, but he was really a mainstream media newspaper reporter. I mean, he worked for some large newspaper, like the San Francisco Chronicle. And I passed the document around to the other game designers at Lucasfilm, as we always do. We usually get feedback from each other. And Ron Gilbert didn't think it was funny enough. I mean, it was humorous, but it wasn't far enough. I didn't push it far enough. So we ended up doing a small company meeting with the designers and did a brainstorming session, try to push it further out, and came with give the game more of a slight twist. And so we pulled out the Marin telephone book, started looking randomly through different names, and Zak McKracken came up. I think we found a Zak one place and a McKracken somewhere, and they just felt like it was right. We changed his job to writing fake news, a term which I don't think existed back then, at a crappy tabloid newspaper. Came up with the game's title based on what the aliens were doing to us humans, which is making us stupid, mind-bending us, make us more stupid than they were, and that's how we came up with it. And this was a couple-hour meeting. I think all that came. When I went back and looked at the game and the original design doc, it really hadn't changed. It was just kind of twisting it a bit to make it just more wacky. So here's the box. You've already seen this. The artist for this was Steve Purcell, who created the Sam and Max comics. He's now a director at Pixar. He was a co-writer-director on Pixar's Brave and a TV show called Toy Story That Time Forgot. It's a TV movie. Back of the box, Does anyone know who those two scuzzy guys are on the back? Anyone? No? Zoom in a little bit. So that's Matthew Kane on the left. He will be joining us soon from San Francisco. And that's me on the right. And I usually don't, and we're both wearing nose glasses and hats. I usually don't have a beard, but I had the brilliant inspiration that if I didn't shave for 9 months, that I could save maybe 5 minutes a day. And over 9 months, I got back 16 hours. So that was probably 2 or 3 days that the game shipped earlier. It was really good. And then I ended up going on a vacation, and that's when I did the shaving. It was good. It's great. We packed out a newspaper, example of the National Inquisitor, and it was partially a value-added component, so to prevent people from pirating the game. So they actually got this full, this large newspaper, but it also had a lot of information in it, which acted as hints on various things. We didn't give away the puzzle, but there were things that were pointing to things you might want to do in the game. I didn't create this. This was done by our marketing group. They did a brilliant job. So here's a little video. Some of this you've seen. Notice that the lines were very similar in the movie. But boss, I'll never win a Pulitzer working for this sleazy tabloid. I'm sick of making up stupid stories that make up stories that aren't stupid. Look, just do this last feature, and then you can write your own novel. Here's your ticket to Seattle. Want more on that vicious two-headed squirrel that's been attacking campers? All right. And while you're there, the first UFO sighting happened on Mount Rainier 50 years ago. Write it up too. Tabloid reporter strangles boss over lousy assignment. What was that? Nothing, boss. And then he goes to sleep. Later that night, Zak's in bed alone again. So sad. Now this is the Commodore 64 version, the very original version. I spent several weeks trying to get the timing of all the interactions to match the sound and the music that Matthew Kane wrote. Seriously, right on the beat. Wow, what a game. So this is the CGA, this is the EGA version, second version for PC, 16 colors. Then we did it again for the FM Towns. It's 256 colors. Here's an example of a cutscene. First time we get to meet the aliens who happen to live downstairs from Zak. This is an example of switching characters. I'm getting a little tired of waiting. Yeah, this place is, it's got a great beach, but no Santa, no boys. You should have gone to Fort Lauderdale. Okay, that's enough. So, thank you. Well, while researching this or putting this together, so much easier than it used to be. Last time I gave a talk like this 14 years ago, I could just go on YouTube and download complete playthroughs that fans create and then put up on YouTube. And I was horrified when I realized that the only version that had the sound, music, and the animation correct was the US version of the Commodore 64. Every other version, everything got messed up. No one really cared when they did the conversions to have it match. The Europe version, since your clocks or everything runs at 50 hertz instead of 60 hertz, everything was about 20% slower, so the music just didn't match. So I went to actually the original C64 version. There I am. This is probably around the time I just finished the game, and I'm still wearing the t-shirt, you see. Proud to say that it still mostly fits, as long as I do this a little bit. I wanted to read a couple of, I went on social media, and I was asking people on Twitter and Facebook and other places, I guess the Thimbleweed Park Forum, if they could remember anything about having played the game when they were young. And I got dozens and dozens of these, and I'm sorry I couldn't include them all because they're all just brilliant. So I'll read a few of them. This is from Soon Marcher from Twitter. I made this walkthrough when I played it on my C64. It ended mid-sentence, somewhere around Pick Up White Crystal. And you can see him as a kid having written this entire book that he saved. Should have dated the darn thing. I guess it was about 25 years ago, so I was about 10 or 12 years old. Maniac Mansion, Zak, Boom, Monkey Island, they all contributed to me learning English. And I heard this from a lot of people that, before we had the translated versions in your languages, people didn't want to wait, so they just grabbed the game and they taught themselves English by having to solve it. This is from our friend Zak McKracken. Hey. First time I was a teen, I had played Maniac Mansion, liked it, but I was disappointed for not having finished it without hints. So I wanted to play Zak entirely by myself without any help. It took me 3 months, but I did it. Satisfactory. I had played Zak with my cousins 30 years ago, and now I have shown it to a teen I know. This is from Robbie Crossfeld, Segrax on Twitter. I used to play it with my mom during the school holidays back in 92, 93. You can see it here on my Amiga, on our Amiga in Amiga 2000 during our house renovations. And you can see it on the screen there. There's the kid, when he was a kid. Every time I think of Zak, I smell the scent of roast chicken. I picture myself as a 13-year-old unpacking a colorful box I had just retrieved from the local post office near our summer home. I unwrapped the package, I examined the back cover, I saw you and Matt, the in-game screens, and I smelled it. I was right outside the deli where my mother was buying lunch. They were roasting chickens, and the scent wafted through a vent I was under. I was mesmerized by the game when 2 hours later, I put the floppies in my 1541 drive and ran the game on my C64. And yet, above all, that scent has been imprinted into my memory of Zak. I'm now 41. Some days ago, I was in the same little town. Guess what? The deli is still there, and it still roasts chickens. Passing under the vent, I smelled the scent, and again I went, "Oh my God, Zak!" without even thinking. This is from Sigma Jump. I played Zak with my dad on the C64 when I was still in single digits. He helped me walk through stuff because he knew the game back and front. Just last year, I got him Zak from GOG.com, which, by the way, you can now get it legally for all those who've pirated the game before. It's like $5 or $6, €5 probably. This time, I had to walk him through things because I'd recently played and he'd forgotten. So I loved that. I've heard this from a lot of different people where they had memories of playing with a brother or a father, and then at some point they play the same game with their kids or with their brother again, and just really bonding experience for them. I played Zak. This is from YRFACE, Your Face. I played Zak as a kid in 1989 on our C64. My older brother and I loved Maniac Mansion, and even my mom didn't seem to mind it as much as the other video games we played. So she bought us Zak McKracken, and we were so excited to have another Lucasfilm game. We got stuck a lot, but it was fun to try a bunch of things and then come back to it the next day after thinking of a bunch of ideas. My brother has since passed away, but replaying Zak now brings back some really great memories of playing as kids and discovering it together. Fast forward, and I get to share the experience with my son, who is totally into playing Zak with me and also loves Thimbleweed Park. It's been a real treat that Thimbleweed Park opened these doors for us. And for those who don't know, that's a game that Ron Gilbert, Gary Winnick, and I worked on, finished about a year ago, year and a half ago it came out. And very similar to the point-and-click games we created way back in the late 80s and early 90s. So let me go through, I have a few minutes left, a few in-jokes that appear in Zak and other games. In Maniac Mansion, there's this chainsaw, and this is our first point-and-click or graphic adventure. And Ron didn't know that you shouldn't be putting a bunch of things in the game that had absolutely no use. And so there's a chainsaw on the wall there in the kitchen. It's a kitchen tool. Lots of blood on the wall, which we later find out is ketchup. And if you pick it up, which you can, and look at it, it says, I think it's out of gas. Well, you can't use it anywhere in the game. There's no gas in the game. It became a huge, we call it a red herring. It's something which people looked forever for, could never find it. And some people were angry at us for doing that because they wasted so much time trying to figure out what to do with the chainsaw, which had no use other than being a gag. So in Zak McKracken, I figured I'd carry it one step further, and notice there's the youth hostel or the hostel on Mars, and there in one of the cabinets, used for chainsaw gas only. Sorry, used for chainsaws only. It's a gas of chainsaw gas. I don't need it. It's for a different game. In each of the games, we would put posters from all the other titles we had done. And depending on when the game came out, the posters would be different. So this is the later version of the 256 color Zak. So there is a poster of Maniac Mansion, which had already been out. But in the second version of Maniac Mansion, which was a PC version, there's a poster of Zak. And if you look at it, it says Zak McKracken and the Alien Mindbenders. What a great game. I never did figure out what to do with the can of gas on Mars. There's a poster in the Caponians layer of Rescue on Fractalus, which is my first game. But in a later version, we changed it to Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which was the game that came after Zak that we did. We have this jail, which we also doubled as the pirate jail. I mean, we had copy protection with the game, and you had to enter a code that came on a separate piece of paper that was really, really hard to photocopy. It was like dark ink on dark, dark red paper, so you really couldn't put it on a machine and copy it very easily. That was to make sure people didn't pirate the game, at least not easily. So if you miss the code 5 times in a row, you get sent to pirate jail and get locked up, and the guy lectures you about pirating games. Anyway, there on the wall is a poster, and if you say read wanted poster, it says, I can't read the words, but there's a photo of a meteor on it, and that's from Maniac Mansion. Here's, again, back in the Caponians room. There are 2 Easter eggs right there on the screen. First one is that pink thing, which is a rotofoil from one of our first 2 games, Ball Blazer. It's the vehicle that you move around in. And on the door, it says secret door, and it's spelled S-E-K-R-I-T, which is not right. And that's a throwback to a door with a similar spelling in Maniac Mansion. At Skywalker Ranch, the address is 5858 Lucas Valley Road. Total coincidence that it's called Lucas Valley Road. It was named that before George was born, and I don't know if he chose this location because the road was already Lucas Valley Road, or it's just a coincidence. Anyway, that number shows up right there at Zak's apartment, or his house, his flat where he lives, 5858 in San Francisco. And in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, we put a lot of Easter eggs in this one, and a bunch of them from Zak. First is a totem pole from Sam and Max. Steve Purcell mentioned was the cover artist. Below that, there is a stone tablet warning about aliens in disguise, which is a Zak reference. There's an African shaman's mask, which is another Zak reference. It says it's a crystal shard, and below it says, it's just a chunk of crystal I found in a Mayan temple. It's of no use to me, but some flakes in San Francisco want it. And this is the inspiration for that bit in the movie we just saw with the letter. What? Some flakes, yes. Sankara stones, those were in Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom. Here's a statue of a falcon, but it actually says statue of a 1,000-year-old falcon. And of course, we know that means Millennium Falcon, which is Han Solo's ship in Star Wars. A map drawn in crayons, which is another Zak reference. And a fragment of a meteor oozing purple slime, which was another Maniac Mansion reference. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.